theyeshiva.net.
I want to give a special mazel tov to Reb Moshe Deitch, who's here, in honor of the chasana of his daughter last night. Shatayva Matzlachas. We've seen here a chassan come on the day of his chuppah to the shir. We've seen a father of a chassan come on the day of the chasana. But the morning after the chasana, that's a shtickl chiddush. So welcome. Shatayva Matzlachas and Abinyan Adayad. It's a beautiful, beautiful chasana. We should always be able to celebrate simchas with each other. Mit freiliche Herzer. B'soiva smachas. So what was the main point that we learned last time in the previous chapter? That the world has two elements that are both very real. On one hand, there's so much separateness, and that separateness is not a mistake. It's not a random mutation, pun intended. It's inherent to the fabric of creation. Diversity, differentiation, what he calls Heichaltzu. In so many different aspects, wherever you turn, there's diversity. Even within one family, even within one species. Oh, Hashavas Avei de Mamish. Where did you find it? In the Shemus? Okay. Ayeshikoyach Rabbi Isaac. Et getrach wie de... You always got to put yourself into the head of the person in charge, yeah. So that's one aspect of the world. There's another aspect, and that is there's a sense of unity. There's a interdependence. Things are interlinked, interconnected. I can't live without you. We can't live without each other. Everyone is a giver and a taker, not just by people. And the whole system of the planet and the whole system of the universe, everything is interconnected. And that's the Nekud of Achdus. And he says, though both are true, one is represented by Shem Elokim, and one is represented by the name of Yudke Vavke. Elokim is the name that represents Heichaltzu, and that's why it's Lashon Rabim, it's in the plural. Why? Because it represents the Koyach HaPoel Benifel, the unique divine energy that sustains and vitalizes the unique features of every single created being, including its distinct qualities that differentiate it from everything else. Shem Havaya is the Nekud of Achdus in the Bria. Havaya Echad, Hashem Echad, the Nekud of Achdus in the Bria. And it doesn't mean that the two are two separate forces that fight with each other, but they both exist. He says on a deeper level, it's really the same thing. Because in Hashem, in the essence, paradoxes are as logical as non-paradoxes. So all diversity, that's the greatest definition. Unlimitedness is also a definition. It's also a limitation. Sometimes the greatest limitation you can have is that you're unlimited. You don't know how to limit yourself. It's sometimes a very deep limitation. You don't know how to be in a relationship. Right? You have sometimes people, they're very big. They can't make space for anybody else. That's, a jack of all trades and a master of none. Very well. Somebody who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. So, obviously here we're talking a bit on a different level, but the Nekuda is that Bli Gvul, infinity, is also finite, if it can encompass finiteness. So in the core, in Hashem, you have both. The way it comes out in a defined world is Elikim represents the Heichaltzu, the differentiation that comes from the essence, and Havaya represents the Achdus, and the two are really one in the core. The way it comes out in the world is in these two names. And that's the real Achdus, because real unity is not a unity that is defined by one thing. That's a very superficial unity. True Achdus is the unity that comes out from endless diversity, and still it's all one. So Shem Elokim and Shem Havaya are really one. That's why we say Hashem Hu HaElokim. Hashem is Elokim. Elokim is Hashem. It's a very interesting halacha, and Maritz Chius writes that people would make fun of this halacha because they didn't understand it. He says it in his commentary on Gemara. So it's brought in Masechus Sanhedrin. The Rambam brings it to halacha in Hilchos Sanhedrin. The Rambam's words are, it's based on a Gemara in Sanhedrin sheposchu kulam l'chayva, poitri noise miyad, which means if you have a Sanhedrin, let's say you have the court of 71 judges, and somebody comes, and it's even a capital case, and they open up, and they all give a unanimous verdict of guilty. Poschu kulam l'chayva. You have a vote. Sanhedrin is based on votes. Achrei rabim lahatas. You follow the majority. They all open up with a verdict, guilty. No, you would think, send them straight to the death penalty, right? Exactly. I mean, if 70 would say guilty and one would say innocent, we know what the verdict would be. You would follow the majority. Achrei rabim lahatas. That's how. They didn't have another system. That's what the Torah says. That's the system of the Sanhedrin. Obviously, it has to be a majority of Sanhedrin, not a majority of people who don't know or don't care. You have to have a majority of people who dedicate their whole life to this type of research and wisdom and seeking the truth and Yiras Shamayim, etc. But the halacha is poitri noise miyad. I mean, poitri noise, they exonerate him. They can't penalize him with this punishment. So the Maritz Chios says people made fun of this. It's like it doesn't make sense. Right, if 50 people, if the majority said guilty is guilty, and if everybody says guilty, which means it's so obvious, it's like it's not a no-brainer. So poitri noisa. So the Mefarshim struggle with this over the generations. There's even one shitta. I think the Yavit says poitri noisa means poitri noisa lemissa. You send him right to his death. Now, it's such a difficult halach. He says poitri doesn't mean you exempt him. It means like baruch shepatrani, you get rid of him. But it's a very difficult explanation because everywhere in halacha where it says poitrin, it means you're pater, you're exempt, you're exonerated. It's not baruch shepatrani, you get rid of him. I'm just bringing out how difficult halacha is that he even goes to say poitrin doesn't mean you exempt him. It means you right away, you just dismiss him right away, you kill him right away. There's no hesitation. So the Mefarshim explain, the Maritz Chios explains, the Medrash Shmuel explains, different Mefarshim, a fascinating idea. And that is, the Rambam is medayik, one word. He says, Sanhedrin sheposchu kulam l'chayva. Poschu means the opening of the court. They opened the court. Everybody said guilty. There was no discussion. There was no conversation. Nobody argued. Nobody gave a counter-argument. Nobody said, 1 second, let's look at it from this perspective. So he says, that means that this person, this case was not dealt with thoroughly. Because if it was dealt with thoroughly, there had to be a debate. There's always something to say about a person. Yeah, study his background, study the situation, study the circumstances. It doesn't mean he's pater. But if paschu kulam l'chayva, you didn't investigate thoroughly enough the particular situation. If they discussed it and there was an argument and one side persuaded the other side, and then they gave the verdict, then the Rambam wouldn't say poitri noisa. He said, paschu kulam l'chayva. It was right away one side. What is this a dugma for? This is a dugma that to reach the truth of one side, you have to have the other side. If not, even this side, we're not convinced it's true. Practically speaking, if I never hear another perspective, so how do I know my perspective is thorough? It's just, indoctrination. It's always through the paradox that you yourself reach a much deeper place of awareness. So this is an example for this. Even in much deeper levels and more spiritual levels, the real achdus comes out in endless diversity. And in the endless diversity, there's unity. That's a much, much deeper and more real form of unity. It's not a unity that's defined because everybody looks blue and everybody looks red or says the same or dresses the same, looks the same. It's an achdus that is not defined even by the word achdus. It's real unity. So therefore it encompasses all the paradoxes. On the contrary, the more paradox, the more diversity, the more the unity comes out because it's a unity that's not defined by a particular image. So therefore Hashem and Elokim is kol echad. And that's where the two elements in creation, it's not just two elements, it's really one. We define it as two things. Yeah, it's not two things. We define it as two things. That was the main thrust of it. Now gets to the to the next Nakuda. Ubiyere Inyan, to understand this more, Chaf Aleph. Tzrichim lahaktem tchila, lahavin Inyan, ha-Bais oisius, Yud Hey, the Shem Havaya, Shem Chinas, Tzimtzum v'Ispashtus. We said earlier that Yud Kei Vav Kei has 4 letters, Yud and Hey and Vav Hey. That's not stam random, 4 letters. The 4 letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, it says in Kabbalah and Chassidus, they represent the 4 worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, Asiyah. They also represent, if you break it down further, in each world you have all 4 letters. Chachma is Yud, Bin is Hey, Midas, the 6 Midas are Vav, and Malchus is Hey. It's called Chachma, Bina, Za, the other Midas, and Malchus. So within each world you have the 4 letters. Why are there 4 letters? It means it's not just one, undefined oneness. That was his proof that Yud Kei Vav Kei is also connected to differentiation. But it's the way all the differentiation is one. It's one name. But there's Yud and there's Hey and there's Vav and there's Hey. It's not stam 4 letters and 4 worlds, it's just 4. So the explanation is, if you say Yud Kei Vav Kei, Havaya is Loshen Mahava, existence comes from Yud Kei Vav Kei, means existence came out through 4 steps. And those are the 4 steps of communication. Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. There's a pasuk in Eov. Pasuk says, Azra, Vayisapra, Hechina, V'gam Chakra, Vayomer La'adam. He sought, he told the story, he prepared it, he investigated it, and he shared it with a person. It's an interesting pasuk. So the Medrash Tanchuma brings from Rabbi that everything in Torah, before Hashem said it to Moshe Rabbeinu, he prepared it in himself 4 times. It's like before you give a speech, you prepare the speech 4 times. You say it over to yourself in your mind or or verbally, or you write it down 4 times. Not just you don't say the speech once, you prepare it 4 times. That's what Hashem did. That's what the Lashon HaMedrash is. Ha'yomer beinoy lebein atzmai dalet pa'amim. Then he spoke to Moshe. Then he called in Moshe for the speech. He said, Azra, that's the Lashon. Ra, Vayisapra, Hechina, V'gam Chakra, and then Vayomer La'adam. Then you give the drasha. I remember once I was a child, so it was Shabbos afternoon, I was standing by the Farbrengen of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So the people would go over in middle for events. People were making events, sometimes chasanas or big kinusim or shiurim. So they would go up and say l'chaim. So there was a shul making a big dinner, a banquet that night. Mitzvah Shabbos, a big Malav Malka. So they happened to have as a guest speaker my father, as a guest speaker for this dinner. The name of the shul was Avas Moshe, a Maple Street shul. Avas Moshe. So on Maple Street in Brooklyn. So I saw my father went up, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave him l'chaim. I saw he told him something, and he smiled. It was interesting. So I asked him, what did he tell you? So he told me, he asked me, zugegreite drasha was that night. Zugegreite drasha? You didn't prepare the drasha? So my father, he didn't prepare so much. So he made with his shoulders. So he says, Mekstich lernen von dem Eberste. Der Eberste hat zugegreite drasha viermal. Azra, Vayisapra, Echina, V'gam Chakra, V'far Vayomer. So he says, if Hashem could prepare 4 times, you can also prepare 4 times, at least once. I don't know why he wanted so much he should prepare the drasha, but that's what he said. But what's pshat? For today's class, yeah. It was a preparation. What's taka the pshat? I understand it's important to prepare. People who get up and they speak without preparing, you could see it. At least you could sometimes see it. What does Hashem have to prepare? A person prepares. Why? You have to know what to say, how to say. And you also have to know what not to say. It's also important. But what's this idea? Well, Hashem is preparing because there may be a confusion. Exactly. What's exactly the preparation? The structure. You may forget something. You want to make sure you have the word good. What's the idea? Yeah, it's hard to understand. But that's what it says in Medrash. So the Balatanya explains, gewaldike beer, that the preparation 4 times represents 4 steps. 4 steps in the communication of the divine energy to be able to be perceived and experienced by creation. And that's Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. Shem Havaya Meloshin Mahava, it's not stam 4 letters. That's what the Medrash means. Those 4 preparations, first is a Yud, then there's a Hey, then there's a Vav, then there's a Hey. After that, there could be Heichaltzu. That is the source of Heichaltzu. So it's 4 steps of communication, of divine communication. That's pshat oimer benela benatzmai. Not I'm afraid of the people. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to forget the joke. I'm going to forget the vart. I'm going to miss out the punchline. I'm going to forget the fundraiser. It's essential 4 levels and steps of communication in order to be able to bring it down from the divine source into a reality that we know. And that's why you have 4 olamas. Atzilus, B'ri, Yitzir, Asiyah. In Kabbalah, the 4 worlds are an essential idea. What's put this 4 worlds? Why not 20 worlds? Why not 69 worlds? In other places it says Taka, there's endless worlds. It says that. And there's many more worlds. But generally, all of them are defined. Atzilus, B'ri, Yitzir, Asiyah. So again, it's Yud, Hey, and Vav, Hey. Hashem has 4 letters. But each world, essentially, it's like an evolution. It's called Hishtalshalus, like a shalshelis, a chain. It's an evolution or devolution, Rabbi Yaakov, yeah? Devolution. First time I said it, he said it's not evolution, it's devolution. Your wife probably, okay, it's plagufa. Right? Devolution is megeitar up. Hitpatchut, but depends which direction. So it evolves. Atzilus is the Yud, and then there's the Bri, it says. That's what we want to understand. What are these 4 inyanim? What are these? And of course, Nasa Adam B'Tzalmeinu Kidmusenu. The Medrash is not saying it's tam. Like the Rebbe told my father, Medav Zechleiner from them. If Hashem did it, right? So that means that's essential to the art of communication. The art of communication includes 4 essential 4 steps. Each step itself can have many steps, of course. Just like in Atzilus and Bri, there's so many different aspects. But generally, it's 4 steps, Yud and Hey and Vav. What is the Nekuda? One is called Ra, one is called Vayisapra, one is called Hechina, one is called Chakra. So that's what we're going to see the explanation. He starts with Yud and Hey, the first 2. Now here you have to understand something as a Hakdama. And this is a very important introduction. And you have to be a typhus. All the mishalim that we give have one problem. Not a problem, a good problem. If a teacher or a speaker or a lecturer or a Rosh Hashiva, whoever it is communicating, right? The people who are listening exist before the communication. His communication doesn't create the people. It gives the people information, it gives the people inspiration, it gives the people motivation, whatever it is. In this case, the shiur is not giving information to the people. The shiur is creating the student. So now imagine this. Imagine if your words weren't only words, your words actually created the student who's listening to your words. He's not listening to your words, he's being created by your words. Okay? So what you're saying is not just what you're saying. What you're saying is going to define who is listening to it. We don't have that power. We don't do abracadabra kadu. There's people, and I speak to them. You can hear, you can not hear, you can absorb, you cannot absorb. I said it better, I said it worse, effective, not effective. But what if your words, your shiur, doesn't only speak to the audience, it makes the audience. Hu amar vayehi. Yeah, we said this morning in davening, or gonna say, Hu amar vayehi, baruch sha'amar v'hoya ha'olam. When I give a shiur, the world is not created. The world is here before, hopefully the world will be here after. Baruch sha'amar, Hashem's shiur, v'hoya ha'olam. That is what makes the olam. So this is an important shiur. Because the element of communication is defining that which you're communicating. So that's where the 4 steps are not just 4 steps. It creates 4 worlds. It creates 4 different types of realities. Atzilus is the shiur, the way it's the first preparation, Yud. Bri is a different shiur. It's Hey. Yitzir is a different shiur. It's not just this 4 worlds because God gave 4 speeches. It's a different type of consciousness. If the Shia wouldn't go to the last hey, there wouldn't be Olam Asiyah. It would stop by Olam Yitzira. Because there's a last hey, there's an Olam Asiyah. You understand what I'm saying? Huh? You like Olam Asiyah? What's the shlech with Yitzira? You want Dira b'tachtonim. Okay. You and Hashem both like Olam Asiyah. Hashem is begufim. You understand what I'm saying? The distinction. There's going to be a mashal of a teacher and a student. It's a beautiful mashal, but remember the distinction. Here, the world is basically a shear. That's what it is. Yeah. Somebody said, I think, therefore I am. Yeah. Sometimes we say, God thinks, therefore I am. And here we say, God speaks, therefore I am. The world is a shear. It's a presentation. Hashem is giving a shear. It says in Mishnayos, Basara Mamaros, Nivra Ha'olam. It was 10 shiurim, 10 sayings. He gives short shiurim, not like some people. Short shiurim. Echad shtayim shalosh, boom, next. Yeah, how long is Aseret Hadibris? How long? How long did it take? How long did Matan Torah take, you think? Huh? How long does it say Aseret Hadibris? How long does it take to say? Even that was B'diburach. So it's a few minutes. The whole Matan Torah is a few minutes. But those few minutes were enough. Right? If you know what you want to say, you don't need more than a minute or two. If you don't know what you want to say, then 10 hours also won't do the trick. Huh? And you prepare 4 times. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a letter from the Rambam. I once saw somebody wrote, I think the Rambam, he wrote to somebody, I didn't have time, so I'm writing a long letter. I didn't have time, so I'm writing a long letter. Because to compress, Heichaltzu is a great art. So the 4 worlds are essentially a reflection of the same shear in different stages. What are those different stages? So I'm going to say the Nekuda generally, and then we'll be more specific. Okay. Yud is a Nekuda. Hey is always an expansion, right? Yud is the smallest letter in the alphabet. We always say Yud is a seminal point. It could be smaller, but if it's the closest you get to smallness. I mean, Yud is just, it's a Nekuda. A little line on the top, a little line on the bottom. It's called Kaitzer Shel Yud. The Yud has a little crown on top, a little thorn on the bottom. Kaitzer Elyon, Kaitzer Tachten. But the Yud is Yechid a Nekuda. Hey is already expansive in its pashtus. Then you have Vav. Vav is like a Yud, but it's a Yud that's much longer. It comes down. It's called Hamshacha. It's an extension, literally like a channel, like a pipe, like a line, a kav that represents a flow. And then there's a second hey, which is obviously the first hey is an expansion of the yud, and the second hey is an expansion of the vav. That's why it's 2 heys. Why not put in a new letter? Mix it up a little bit. Give us more, put into the cholent a 4th ingredient. And the answer is because the heys are important. The hey is the expansion of the previous letter. So there's the way the Yud expands and the way the Vav expands. The Yud is, you have Hey La, the higher Hey, and Hey Tata, the lower. What does that mean? So very briefly, the Baal HaTanya explains, we also learned it at length in the Maimer, we learned a few years ago in the 3 weeks, and the Shiva de Nechemda from Reb Hillel, Issa B'Psikta, about Galus and Geula, the whole purpose of Galus and Geula. Over there's also a long section on this. So the Nekuda is as follows. When somebody wants to communicate, and this is really in all forms of communication, because from Hashem, it's not just Hashem did it. If he did it that way, that's how the system works. If that's how the system works, we're all part of that system. So communication has 4 elements. 2 is within the mashpia. 2 are within the mashpia, but it's about the makabel. Mashpia is the teacher, makabel is the recipient. Yud and Hey, it's all within the giver, the one who's going to teach. Vav and Hey are also within him. It's all preparation. Preparation nobody knows about. Preparation I do myself. It's beinoila ben atzma. But in preparation itself, there's Yud and Hey, and there's Vav and Hey. First letters and the last letters. The first element of preparation is all within the teacher. Yud is a nekuda. The whole message is summarized in a nekuda. If you want to speak very practically, to say in the most practical sense, before you speak, you have to know what you want to say. And that has to be able to be summed up in 2 words, in 1 sentence. If not, don't open your mouth. You'll see sometimes a person speaks and speaks and speaks, and you say, Was will sagen? And you'll ask him, topic, another topic, another topic, another topic. Yud is a nekuda, it's a nekuda. What's the message? Elevator pitch. They call it mission statement. But even whatever it is, it could be a shir gemara, any Indian, yeah? What's the vart? What's the vart? Don't give me a 10-minute speech what the vart is. It may take you 10 minutes, it may take you 10 hours, it may take you 10 pages, but there's a yud. What's the vart? The yud is not enough. With the yud, you can't give a shir, you need a hey. The hey is the next level. The hey expands the yud. There's what I want to say, right? What? But how is it being built? How am I saying it? What is it made up of? A klal is a klal, right? I want to build a house. I have a vision. I want a house. I want a company. I want to create an organization. I want to create a website. I want to change the world. Okay, or more accurately, I want $10 billion. You relate? Beautiful. Okay. Now, what are the mortar and the bricks of that vision? Huh? All within the person. L'chayda, beautiful. Now say it. No. Now you need a vav. What's the issue with Yud and Hey? This is the big issue in communication. You are thinking about it from your perspective, but you're speaking to people. They don't have your perspective. They're in a different world. That's the vav. The vav is, you got to get on a sliding pond and go down. You got to go down. You have to now understand who you're talking to. This is not easy. What's their mindset? Where do they come from? Who are they? What are their sensitivities, right? In the world of business, when they coach people who are communicating, you're trying to sell products, you're trying to get investors, right? They'll always tell you, articulate the need, right? Make him feel that he needs it. MS. If you don't do that, they say there was once a kid, a teenager, he needed a job. He was out of school, needed a job. So he came into a big company and he said he's gewaldig in sales. Gewaldig. So the manager or the CEO sees him, he says, really? Really? Convince me right now, to buy a bottle of water from you. I'm not thirsty. I drank. Convince me right now. So there was a newspaper on the desk. So he took out his lighter and he lit the newspaper. So the whole desk was down. All the papers were fine. Water. He said, I have water to sell. So I don't know if that's mamash how you have to make a presentation. Light the place on fire. I don't know if he hired him or not, but he was obviously a creative guy. He certainly convinced him that you need water. But what does it really mean? What does it mean? If I'm not speaking in your world, if I'm not speaking to you, inside of you, it's meaningless. And you'll see, sometimes people, communicators, get up. They may be brilliant, but nobody, the word is relevance. Zelo relevanti. Today maze relevanti? Huh? You just got it. Relevanti is a good word. Karev elecha hadava miyayid. If it's not karev elecha, it's nice. I mean, how we share tiniest? There was no vav. Vav is a big avoida. Because vav, you have to go out of your own world. Not so easy to go out of your own world. You're communicating to your spouse. You're communicating to your children, right? You're saying beautiful things. But you have to know the other person's world, the other person's perspective. If you don't understand, sometimes your point will be completely misconstrued and have the opposite effect. At best, it'll just be meaningless. Sometimes even worse. But that's not enough. Now you need a second hey. A second hey is just like I had a first hey. What was the first hey? How my vision can be articulated in pratim and details. Now I need a second hey. Once I know your world, once I brought it down, now how do I build it in your world? This is the last thing. How do you structure a class or a presentation for the audience that they should be able to receive it? You get it? You see here a moedic thing that this 4 stages in Kabbalah and Chassidus, it's literally reflected on every level. In other words, you could use this lahavdil, not that that's the tachlis, but you could use this as a complete workshop of teaching people how to communicate. You need the 4 oises Shem Havaya. And the reason is, it's not a mistake, it's not stam a cute mashal, it's because infinity wants to create a world of finiteness. How is Hashem going to give his shir? And he wants the people should get it. Remember, we're not only getting the shir, we're being created by the shir. So if there was only a yud, what would we look like? We would look like the shir, the way it's in the teacher's mind, the nakuda. That's what the world would look like. What would that be practically? What do you think? What would that world look like? Huh? What would you see? Well, there's something. What would you see? You would see one nakuda. You would see the nakuda. There is such a world. It's called Olam HaAtzilus. That's Olam HaAtzilus. The world Atzilus, it's called Eitzel V'Samoch. Eitzel, close. It's called Olam HaAchdus. Why? It's basically going into the teacher's mind and seeing that nakuda. Everything is there. The whole in Atzilus you have apples, and it says in the brought in Arizal. There's a tapuach in Atzilus. That's apples in Atzilus. There's oranges. There's even watermelon. I don't know sushi, but it's not an apple. It's not an orange. It's Achdus Hashem. You understand? Yeah. So if it would stop there, that would be the world. That would be the student. But it didn't stop there. There was the second step of the shir. That's the hay. What's the hay? The hay is the way the yud takes on dimensions. I know that's your nakuda, but give me the structure of it. All in the teacher. It's still in the teacher. What would that world look like? That world would be an expansion of that yud. But it's still before the vav. There's no vav yet. So if the shir would stop there, if the shir would come out right there, it would be moededik. For whom? For the mashpia. But everyone is like, that went right over my head. What would that mean in creation? Went over my head. It means that we would not exist as we exist. And that's the Olam HaBriya. The world of Briya is a world. It's a state of consciousness. In Kabbalah, it says a concept called Aliyas HaOlamus, going up worlds or going down. It says davening has different stations. So most people, you read it, it's like, Chinese. And even if you know Chinese, this is not even that. What Aliyah, Vu Aliyah, Ven Aliyah. So you say it's V'helike Yid, nobody is shaykh to understand it. But really, it's not like that. The Balatanya wanted we should understand, at least on some level. It means going through layers, literally going through layers. It's almost like when you have the shir and you say, you know what, I want to go through it. The Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, it takes 40 years for the student to understand Koyim inish adar boyin shnin loy koyi inish adaita derabbe. Peladik Gemara. It takes 40 years for a person to understand, to be oimid on the das of the Rav. And it's a raya from a pasuk. Moshe told the Jewish people in Kisavai, "Leinasan Hashem lechem leiv ladas enayim lirois esnayim lishmaya ad hayoyim hazeh." 40 years after Yetzias Mitzrayim, you haven't had a heart to lay a heart to know, and eyes to see, and ears to. What do you mean? 40 years we're with you? No. You haven't seen anything yet. Why? It takes 40 years to unravel. So let's say you unravel. That's called Aliyah Sailamus. If you go back. Any nakuda in the world, right? You unravel it, you go deeper and deeper. From Asiyah, you can climb to Yetzirah, from Yetzirah to Briya, from Briya to Atzilus. It's climbing from the hay to the vav, from the vav to the hay. After the last, so you have a vav. Vav is, the hay is gewaldik, it's the expansiveness of the yud, but it's all in the mind of the teacher. It's my idea, I get it, and I have the whole thing. The problem is it has nothing to do with you. It will not speak to you. Now you need a vav. It's a whole new tzimtzum. And you could see sometimes, when you hear a shir, right? An interesting way of, They ask you sometimes to mark it, right? Mark. How is it in terms of the Yud? How is it in terms of the Hey? How is it in terms of the Vav? How is it in terms of the Hey? For example, you have somebody who gives a lot of details, and extrapolates and digresses and stories and Meshalem. What's the Yud? Ich weiß nicht. One of the worst things you could do if you're giving a speech is digress without a reason. People love doing it. Etzich demont, like the story with the Rav. He had one drasha on Koirach, and he would travel. But he only had one drasha. What do you do, Parshas Noach? Nobody think about Koirach. So he would drop the handkerchief, and he would say, it's a mazel, the earth didn't swallow up my handkerchief as it swallowed up Koirach. Once we're talking about the earth swallowing up Koirach, I heard a moide de kevart. And that was it, and people were impressed. Even Parshas Noach, he has such brilliant ideas on Parshas Koirach. You always have to be able to justify what's the Yud, what's the Nekuda. Always. On the other hand, you have a person, the Nekuda is clear, but the Hey was not developed. The structure was not developed. Sometimes you have the Yud and the Hey, but there was no Vav. There was no Vav. In other words, it didn't touch me. It didn't affect me. It didn't go into my brain. It didn't go into my heart. It didn't go into my kishkas. In that itself, there's many levels. Sometimes I know how to apply it, but I'm missing the last Hey. And the last Hey is really creating a structure, an architecture, literally architecture. It's like building a building. That's the Hey. Hey is a building. It's very expansive. A beginning, a middle, and an end. Each one is a separate chush. One is the chush of Chachma, one is Bina, one is Midas, one is Malchus. And then Vayoyme la'adam. Now open your mouth. Before this, don't open your mouth. This is an avodah. Hashem did this 4 times. Then Vayoyme la'adam. It's Ra. That's why the first word is Ra, Re'iyah. When you see something, it's always one picture. Just a picture. There's always, the end of a shir, you have to say, you saw a picture. A picture is always on a kud, it's a yud. There's a lot of details in a picture, a lot of details in a piece of art, but it's one vision. You take a look at it and you see it. That's a nekuda, that's Ra, that's Chachma. Then there's Bina, then there's Midas, then there's Malchus. That's Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. So in all communication, these are the 4 letters. Akudim, Nekudim, Brudim. Akudim, Nekudim are before Atzilus. Atzilus starts Brudim, Olam HaTikon. The Olam HaToyu is Nekudim, before that is Olam HaKudim. But here are the 4 worlds of Tikon. So let's see inside a few minutes. The It's clear what I said. Was it missing a Yud, a Hey, a Vav, or a Hey? Yeah, that's before Atzilus. Atzilus begins with Brudim. Tikon, yeah. Interesting words. It's knowing the klal, the principle in every place. Shekasha mashpia roitzel ashpio lahamshich eira lamakabel. She'ene berechil of klal muchrich sheyitzamtzem eira atzmusem mikol v'kol. He says this is a klal. When a mashpia, a giver, wants to communicate light to the recipient, that is not be'erechil of, it's not something that is relative to the world of the recipient. It's something beyond, it's something transcendent. I'm not telling you something that you know already. It's something completely beyond the recipient. There has to be a tremendous tzimtzum. Yitzamtzem atzmusoi mikol v'kol. You have to have the courage to shrink, to condense yourself, to go out of your comfort zone, to go out of your space. Mikol v'kol, it's a very humbling process. You have because the recipient will never have the capacity to receive it the way the light, the way the flow is expansive and in prosperity and in archava and in greatness in the world of the mashpia. After you set aside and you shrink your limit, you limit your very essence, your very core. V'yashir v'yavdil b'tzimtzum. Rak chele koten ma'oid hanitzrich v'roy lav l'dei hashpa shemizeh yumshach ha'er v'shefel l'mekabel ma'kol pana. You're going to basically leave. You're going to set aside everything and you're going to leave only a small, tiny particle that is necessary and capable, nitzrich and roy, to be able to be communicated. And from there, the oir can begin to go to the makabla. So here is a huge yesod, and that is that the first nikud in communication, is the ability and the awareness that I want to communicate. And here, again, communication doesn't only mean words. Communication means every connection. It's not just if I'm giving a speech. It's true in a speech too. But it's true in every level of a relationship, every level of communication. It's about stepping out of my own paradigm and tuning into you. Now, that's very hard. I just want to say, it sounds easy. It's not. Especially if I'm suffering from a deep wound that doesn't make me trust anybody. All I could be doing is feeding myself in order to help myself. To do this takes a lot of confidence because it's dangerous emotionally. You understand what? I'm stepping aside? Really? No. I'm not stepping aside nowhere. I step aside, I die. You have to understand the danger of this emotionally. In a relationship, to really be able to create space for the other, you have to be free. You have to be flexible. You have to be pliable. It could be very, very difficult. There could be tremendous fear and paralysis. I'm not going out of my own world, ever. I'm staying here. You won't come into mine. And sometimes you have that. A person stays, they can't go out. I can't really connect to your world. I'm too, I'm on the defense. I'm on defense. When I'm on defense, I can't go into your space. I just have to protect my space. It could be subconsciously, but I'm trying to explain. Anybody relates to what I'm saying? Huh? It's a very serious thing. I may not even know how to do it. I may push it, not know how to do it. I may be paralyzed, like stuck. There's insects, they paralyze their foe, and then they kill them. I may be pushed, like really stuck, like they call it a deer in the headlights. You ever see in Monsey, middle of the night? Yeah, the deer like freezes. What if you're in that mode? You're the deer, and there's a reason for it because a car came in the middle of the night, whatever that car looked like. Okay, and I froze like the deer. The only difference is the deer after 20 minutes went on. I never went on. I'm still frozen in Monsey. Verglivert, it's called in Yiddish. Verglivert. You know what verglivert means? Karush. Karush. Congealed. Verglivert. How do you say that in Russian? Nobody's frozen in Russia. They drink. They're not frozen. Spirit. Spirit. It melts the ice. The problem is it melts the ice on the outside, not always on the inside. So what happens? If I'm frozen, I can't do what tzimtzum. I can't I can't step aside and really tune in. Listening is an art of liberation. Really listening is, you have to be able to let go. If I'm busy attacking, I'm busy defending, I'm busy criticizing, I'm busy judging, I'm busy frightened, it's normal. But I can't do this. You have to understand that a real mashpia has to have self-awareness. Because if I'm in a defensive mode, I can't even begin to do this. If you're talking to your children and you're defensive, you're basically, and you're anxious, I can't even begin to do this. I'm just busy protecting myself and dodging bullets in my own imagination. So you have to be really self-aware. Are you capable of this? What is this nekuda? This nekuda is really, he says, sometimes 99% of what I know is irrelevant to the recipient. And if I stay there, I can't give him anything. It may be irrelevant. It's beautiful stuff for you. Completely irrelevant. Do you have the courage to be able, he says, very strong words. He has to be yaniach u'metzamtzem kol atzmusay u'mehusay. My entire essence, the way I know it, I have to say, don't worry, just step aside for a few moments. You'll come back. Go to the side room. You're not going to disappear. It may have been real when you were 4 years old, by the way. And anyway, it's irrelevant if the car is real. It's relevant if my brain thought it was real. You understand? And that's a car. What if it was a truck? What if it was a 48-wheeler truck? You know what happens to the deer? And what if the headlights are blinding? They're not just headlights, you have your hazards on. You know how some cars drive in the middle of the night? They blind you. Now that's all a car. And what if it's psychological? I'm just bringing out, you have to be aware of this step. Can I really put aside almost everything I know? It takes a lot of humility, also creativity, but humility. This is where most communication fails. You want to know the challenge? Why are most speeches boring? Rabbi Isaac, why are most speeches boring? Depends where you go. Fine. Okay, because you go to the right places. You go to the right places. But what's the issue? So the key issue, I'll tell you the key issue. The key issue is the person is not really speaking to the people. Of course he's speaking to the people. And he means well, but he's not speaking to the people. He's expressing himself. That's it. And you can't blame him. He's him. He's not me. He's him. So what is he supposed to do? Be me? But that's the art of communication. The art of communication is, it's koyach hatzimtzum. The Ein Sof said, I'm becoming finite. God is not finite. He's infinite. No, I'm becoming finite. And here we are. That's communication. You want to know how to give a speech? Learn from the Rabbi Shalom. His speech was Mesiras Nefesh. He went from being infinite to being finite. That's how you communicate. You could forget your whole atzmos and go into gvul. Wow, that's big. Don't underestimate what a real communication is. Real communication is not expressing myself. That's not communication. Real communication is, I guess, you're so comfortable with yourself, you can you could put yourself aside. You say, what do you mean? I'm talking. No, that's not communication. Talking is just the props. That's not communication. How? They know right away. No, that's why there's different worlds. Every world is a different level of the seer. Of course. There's a neshama of Atzilus. There's a neshama of Bria. There's a neshama of Yitzira. Neshama of Atzilus has different glasses. It's almost like, when you see a world through a microscope, you see a different tissue box. If your neshama is from Atzilus, your glasses are different. It says the neshama of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Adam, Reb Shimon bar Yochai, a few neshamas of Atzilus. They had a certain vision. It says the Rambam was a neshama of Bria. It's brought in Kaut Arizal says the Rambam was a neshama of Bria. There's neshamas of Yitzira. There's neshamas of Asiya. All neshamas begin with Atzilus. Everyone. We all come from the same source. But the way it evolves, it's like the shear. And within Asiya itself, right, there's endless levels where it stops. In Asiya itself, there's, by the way, two levels. There's Asiya Haruchnis and Asiya Hagashmis. Asiya Haruchnis is the last hay. Asiya Hagashmis is the way the speech leaves the teacher. That's our world. You see, till our world, all the shiurim are still within the teacher. So they all feel the divine. Our world is the first world where the teacher he said the speech. Once you say the speech, now somebody can plagiarize it. Somebody can misconstrue it. As long as it's in my mind, nobody can make games with it. Nobody can play games with it. Nobody can make a macha against me, right? Because it's inside of me. Once you say it, the cat left the bag. Now, first of all, they can quote you, right? Hagoynev minaganev, they can plagiarize, misconstrue, misunderstand. You understand? Make machos. That's this world. Here, the speech already goes out and it becomes concretized in a world. The chiddush is, the ability is to be able to connect this world to all the worlds. So the first step you have to always have is, he says, this ability, what's left over after Kol Atzmus is maybe a little part of information this the Mekabel could hear. If I'm sitting down with a 5-year-old kid and I want to teach him something, don't teach him what you know, right? You may be a genius, you're looking at a Pasuk Chumash or a Mishnah and you know so much about this. Put it all aside and tune in. Really tune in. V'hainu inyan hanakuda. And that's pshat, you're left with a nakuda, you're left with a seminal point. So this is the introduction before you get to the first yud even. The inyan hanakuda, you're left with a nakuda. Sheyesh boi beis minei tzimtzumim. And this nakuda, which is a little point, has two aspects. Ha'alef, מה שנסצמצם ונסלם כל העצמוס דמשפיע ולנישה בגילי רק הנקודה אחת דיוד שזהו הנישה מן הצמצום והלם לגמרי מה שרואה לי יסבא בהשפעה והמשכה בגילי למקבל כל פנה. The first tzimtzum means condensement, shrinking, compression, is what? That the whole light of the core of the mashpia of the teacher is concealed. It doesn't disappear, it just has to get concealed. You have to put it aside. Nothing disappears, it's not being destroyed. It's nisalim. Nisalim means, it's like the moon. When it's concealed, the moon doesn't disappear, just I don't see it. I'm not going to show it in my speech. It's not my point. Because if I show it, I'm not going to be speaking to you, I'm going to be speaking to me or showing off. You understand? Nisalim means, can there be parts of you that are concealed? It's fine. Not everybody has to see it. So that's the first thing, that the atzmus of the mashpia gets concealed. And what's left over? One nakuda. Wow, that's all you know? That's all I know. That's all I know, this nakuda. This is my yud, that's what I'm left with. Now you're a mashpia. You're left with one nakuda. In a revealed way, that's what's left. Why? Because that's what's left from the tzimtzum, that which is worthy to be communicated to the recipient. If it's more than a yud, you won't get it. So you took your whole genius and you condensed it into a yud. Why? Because that yud could be communicated. It's the beginning of it. Bais, shema shenisha min hashefa hu gamkin b'bchinas tzimtzum dafka. There's another point. Even that nekuda that's left over from the whole flow is also in a state of tzimtzum. It's condensed. That itself didn't expand yet. In other words, it can't be communicated yet. That leftover information, that yud, is also tzimtzum. First is that 99% is concealed and you're only left with a yud. Now that information in the yud wasn't developed yet. It's still a seminal point. V'nikra ayin, still a state of ayin. Ayin means no thingness. You can't give that yud over yet. It's tiny. There's no hamshacha. There's no ispashtus. There's no meat and potato. There's no breadth. There's no depth. There's no length. It's not yet gilui. So there's going to have to be a hay. There's still going to have to be a hay to take that yud and turn that yud into a mansion, into an expansive mansion. So in the beginning, when I spoke about the 4 stages, I said Yud and Hey is in the Mashpia, Vav and Hey is in the Makabel. But here we're learning something even more. Before you begin, you start with Tzimtzum. Before you begin Bechlal. Because Yud Kei Vav Kei is already communication. Hashem is communicating. It's a name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Mahava. You want to be Mahava? Yud. Then is a Hey, then is a Vav, then is a Hey. Let's just go mamish another few moments. I want to finish it. Generally, you'll understand from this how it works. Lamaila means by Hashem. The liyoyl sha'atz musayr in sayv baruch hu b'chinas ar pashat b'tachlis bilti yachalav begilayer liyas afilu makar l'chol ishtal shlo soylemes u'kamei shekosov ki imcha mekar chayim the gam mekar chayim u'rak imcha levad she'nei berach atzmus klal v'nikra stima the kol stim in the leis machshava tfisa beklal gam lebchinas machshava gduma u'lezois l'hoy yachal liyas gilayer v'shafa mekarim l'ishtal shlo soylemes ki im aydei atzimtzum showin nis almus ha'or sha'or nichlol v'nisalim batzmus etchila k'dei sheyavei achakach efes katzei de b'chinas gilayer v'hainu kifi ha'nitzrach l'inyin ha'shafa l'olemes b'chlolus shu hayut. Here he describes the whole thing the way it's describing the divine. That what? Since the core, the essence of the Or, of Hashem's light, is infinite, it's called Or Pashat B'Tachlis, it's absolutely undefined. So if that was manifested in the Bria, what would the world be? The world would be Or Ein Sof Mamash. Would be pure undefined infinity. If that was manifested, that would be manifested. Again, imagine the teacher's shiur. Everything, the way it's in him, comes out. What's left from the 5-year-old? He's like, that was boring. Right? That was boring. In this case, you wouldn't say that was boring. You'll say, okay, I guess I can't come into existence. I can't come into existence. So what's the first step? He says, Imcha mekar chayim. The Bais says, with you is a source of life. So he says, even the source of life, Hashem as a source of life, is only Imcha. Imcha means it's with you, it's not you. In other words, it's not be'erech of atzmos. In other words, Elikus as a mekar chayim is completely condensed relative to the core. No thought can grasp him, even the highest thought. So therefore, you want to create Heichaltzu ha'olam, is the evolution of the world. The first thing, this is how the Eitz Chaim of the Arizal opens up. There has to be what? A tzimtzum. What's the idea of tzimtzum? Tzimtzum means to condense, to filter, to shrink, to compress, to limit, to withdraw, to withdraw. What's the withdrawal of tzimtzum? It's this withdrawal. The Or has to be concealed. Doesn't have to be obliterated, but it has to be concealed. What does it mean it has to be concealed? Where does it go to? So he says the Or is nichlol v'nisalem ba'atzmusa. The Or goes back to the core. It's, so to speak, goes into the core and it's not manifest. Just like by the teacher. He doesn't lose his light, but the light remains concealed in his essence. In the communication, what can come? But if all the light goes back to the essence, so there's no world. So he says, Efes katseyu, one little particle or wave of light, one little particle or wave of light can come out, which could be responsible for the creation of all of the universes that could now assume some form of defined identity. You get it? This is where the teacher and student metaphor is so important. What's the tzimtzum by the teacher? The first thing, this is not about me. It's about you. I'm telling you, it's the hardest part of communication. I was invited by the Pentagon to speak to all the chief of chaplains of the U.S. Army. So unlike a Jewish event, they gave me 2 years to prepare. You know, the Jews call you a night before, a few hours before, at best a week before. The Yekka is 6 months before. The Hasidim after. They call you after. But the American Army, you know, they call early. So I had 2 years to prepare. And I prepared well. I came. Hilton Head, South Carolina. I came the night before. I'm sitting in my hotel room. And I'm writing. I'm just, going through my notes. I'm reading it. And but when I came the night before, I met the people. I met the chief of chaplains. His name is Douglas Carver. And I met a lot of other people. I met the soldiers. It was the first time I really saw the culture of the U.S. Army from up close. It's a whole culture. It's a universe. It's not with the saluting and different salutes. You know that there's a different salute for a different rank. You know that? You don't know that. And I didn't know how to do it. So Yankel Goldstein, my friend, says, stop saluting because you're doing everything wrong and you could be penalized. Because the worst thing is salute a 4-star general with the salute that shaykh to a 3-star general. Achas dosa. You know what I mean? It's like 900 push-ups. So he says you're a good guy, but 900 push-ups may be a little above the limit. So just stop saluting. You're a regular citizen. You don't have to salute. If they don't salute, it's medida b'malchus. And it's a whole culture. So I'm meeting all these people, and I met 3 in the morning. I was sitting, and the priest, there was a lot of priests because it's chaplains. So they wake up early, and I had a room by the beach. There was an beautiful ocean. So they were jogging. 3, 4 in the morning, they were all jogging with the Bible. Jogging. And I'm looking at the crowd and I'm like, this speech is good, but it's just not going to hit the spot. It's just not going to hit the spot. Because I wrote the speech from a very Jewish, I'm a Jew, right? You may have noticed that. I grew up Jewish. My parents are Jewish, right? I married a Jew. My shviga is a Jew. My mother is a Jew. My father is a Jew. I grew up in a Jewish community. I still live in a Jewish community. So we think a certain way. And then I'm like, it was all good, but it was just, it was good for a dinner of the Mir Yeshiva. the Telza Yeshiva. Maybe Yeshiva University, but this is people, they don't have your traumas. They don't have your issues. They don't have your insecurities. They have a whole different reality. Can you tune into it? I scratched the whole thing. I threw it in the garbage. I'm like, I'm not saying a word of this. And I rewrote the whole thing. Why? I knew right away, I just felt that it was all nice, but it was all from my world. You have to go out of your world. It's not an easy, first of all, you have to know about the other world. How do you even know about the other world? You have to listen. You have to tune in. You have to be curious. You have to find out about the other world. People talk to teenagers, right? You see sometimes Rosh Yeshivas, Mashpiyim, Mashgichim, they fabreng with them, or they give a Musar Shmuz in Yeshiva, they give a shir. But all of the teenagers, you ever see that glazed, dead look? You ever see? You ever see that dead? You remember when you were a teenager? You know that dead look on the 17-year-old, 16-year-old? It's like, like when is the old man going to be done? They're not arguing with them, right? There's just no... He means well. He's saying beautiful things, but it's just so irrelevant. Why? He didn't bother ever to go out of his own world and really, really tune in what this person is going, like, who are you? And then say, whatever I know is irrelevant. That has to go back into me. It'll be fine. We're going to come back to it in an hour. I'm not going to take your departure now as a sign for what I'm saying. And then you have to, that's a yud. That's a very courageous yud. What are you left with? You're left with a little shefa. So that's the tzimtzum that happened in Ein Sof. Hashem was ready to become finite, kivayachal. Let's just finish. V'al zeh nemar megala amukois mini choshech. The pasuk says in Eov, Job 12, he reveals the depths from darkness. The mebchinas choshech ve'elam ha'atzmi dein soif shenikra choshech sisra, yashas choshech sisra, shobchinas stima dechol stimin nimshach gili bchinas anakuda hanal. Megala, he's Megala. Megala Amukas, the sefer Megala Amukas is from this pasuk, Reb Nosson Shapiro from Krakow. Megala, famous sefer, Megala Amukas. He reveals it, what's choshech from darkness? How do you reveal light from darkness? So he says the Ein Sof is called darkness. Why? Because it's not accessible. It can't be manifested to me. Sometimes the greatest light is the greatest darkness, if you don't have kalim for it. Right? What we're calling choshech just means, for me, it's dark. It's like if you look at the sun in the middle of the day, look at the sun, what is it going to do to your eyes? It's blinding. Why? No light? Too much light. Too much light, you don't look at it, but it's dark. So he says, this choshech ha'atzmi, the essential darkness of Ein Sof, it's essentially dark. Not dark in a negative sense, but completely beyond what I can absorb. So I can't call it light. Light is communication. What's light? Revelation. But in science today, what's light? Light is basically the method of communication. If you want a sophisticated term for communication, it's light. That's God's term. We call it speeches, communication. God's term for it is light. Everything emits light. Light is the gilui. But if it's not begilui, there's no oid. It's choshech. That's called choshech. The black hole. This is the black hole, the ultimate black hole. Black hole has light. But it's so the power of gravity is so deep, so powerful, that it doesn't allow the light to escape. So it's called a black hole, because it has the most light. You understand? It's gewaldig. The black hole has more light than anything else. Why is it called black? The answer is because the gravitational pull is so powerful, it holds the light back, so the light is not emitted. So what does it become? It becomes a black hole because it's full of light. That's a mashal for choshech of Ein Sof. It's the biggest light, so it's dark, it's black. It's a black hole. You understand? That's the tzimtzum. All the oir has to stay in the atzmos. Can't come out. Oh, in order to be able to release a little light. So he says, so what happens? So from this is Megala Amukos comes a nekuda. One nekuda. Megala, from this choshech is Megala a nekuda. V'hainu la'acher atzimtzum v'helem shenikra Amukos. The choshech sistre nimshach acher kach b'chinas giluyar. What gilui? That little particle that the world could ultimately receive, and it can become the identity of creation. That's the gilui, post tzimtzum. That's the yud. But now we have the second tzimtzum. Even this revelation can't do anything for me. What's the student going to do with my yud? It's too ayin. It's for me. It's nothing. But for the student, it's everything. If you give him that ayin, he's like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. So now you have to take that yud and develop it. You understand? And that's another level of Mesiras Nefesh. That yud, you could say it's not serious. There's nothing there. No. For the student, it's everything. That yud, you now have to turn into something. From ayin, you have to turn it into a yesh, to a hey. That's what he said. That yud is still concealment for the worlds. You just said that's what's left over that could go into the worlds. That's true. But you're going to need to develop that nekuda into ispashtus. In a nekud, it's beyond revelation. V'nikra ayin. So it's called ayin. No thingness. Hein legabaya atzmos. It's called ayin for two reasons. From the perspective of atzmos, why is it called ayin? She'ena teufes makim ve'ena berach. Because it's nothing. It's just the seminal last point. So it's called ayin. V'hein legabaya olamis. The world will also call it ayin. Why? V'she'ena b'chinas gilead ayin. Because it's no thingness. Ayin is nothingness. And ayin is no thingness. Atzmos calls it ayin. Why? Because it's just the leftovers. It's ayin. It's not teufes makim legabe, the full light. The worlds call it ayin. It's too beyond. It's no thingness. It's intangible. It's still a yud. Without the hey, it's still a yud. So they both call it ayin from opposite reasons. From atzmos, it's ayin because it's just a nekuda. It's what's left over from the whole earth. That which can ultimately be relatable to the universe. From the universe's perspective, it's called ayin because it's still completely beyond me. It's just a seminal point, and it still needs to be developed, be able to be articulated. That's going to be the later process. So in every person's life, you have a metaphor for these aspects. You have an element of this. Okay. We're going to take a break here. So I'm away for a few days. So this week there won't be shiurim anymore. There won't be a shiur tomorrow, Tuesday, and also not Thursday. Not for the women and not for the men. So please, your wives or daughters who come, if you could tell them tomorrow there's no class. I announced it last week. So Tuesday there's no class and Thursday there's no class. And then we're going to resume Bli Neder next week. Shabbos, yeah. But not Tuesday and not Thursday. So I wish everybody a wonderful week in all four stages, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. Hatzlacha Rabbi. Thank you for gracing us. Welcome. He's with us every day from Montreal. I was saying Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey in the beginning. Yud and Hey is in the teacher, Vav and Hey is in the teacher. It's all true. But here he went a step further. You have to understand that even the first Yud comes after a big tzimtzum. There's still going to be Vav and Hey. That's a whole other... the tzimtzum makes it relatable. Tzimtzum creates identity. Oh, so we learned via Daita Moskva that what happens after 40 years, in the Yud, there's really everything. It's just concealed. So ultimately, you can unravel it from the Yud. Ultimately. In other words, it's not like the teacher, when he's giving a shiur, he forgot everything he knows. It's all there. It's just not being communicated in a way that's overwhelming, but it's there in the words. So therefore, after 40 years, the student could reach and see things that he never saw in the beginning, not because they weren't there, because the tools were limited.
Reverse engineering.
He can do reverse engineering, yeah. When the student becomes like the teacher himself, so then he could see it from a different perspective. You understand? He sees it from down, looking up. The teacher sees it looking down. It's a different, but it's the same thing, but it's really opposites. So reverse engineering is when he could see that whole process. Yeah. If you want a relationship, that's if your relationship to God, you're asking a good question. Do you have to know your car in order to drive it? Excellent question. No, I like it. Do you have to know your car? You don't have to know your car. Oh. It's a beautiful, beautiful question. So what do you have to know all this? So that's if your relationship with Hashem is like a relationship with a car. Okay. Listen what I'm telling you. If it's like a relationship with a car, you're right. And that there are streams of Judaism that keep it that way because there's a certain simplicity. It's a same structure.
It works.
Yeah, it could work. Right. What happens if you're married to somebody and you say, listen, you're just my car. I don't want to know about you. I don't want to know what's happening inside of you. You're just a car. I'll be with you. We're going to go to Costco together. But you're a car, remember. And I appreciate you. And I'm going to invest a lot of money in my car too. I want my car to be beautiful. And I want my car to be perfect. And my car I cherish. And I'll do anything for my car. But I really don't want to know anything about you.
I was thinking that you were saying, no, you were saying the previous.
Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch tells you.
Your wife like yourself, treat her like yourself.
Right.
If you really love you, what I need to
So you could.
What does that have to do with this tinsel?
Right. So there's different levels of a relationship. So there's a relationship where I could just give you rules. When your wife comes home, you smile and you say, hi, good evening. Like when your car, and that's beautiful. And that's beautiful. And that's beautiful. Parallel parking. Yes. Parallel parking. Respect for the car. Don't crash it. Be sensitive to it. Don't slam the door like a meshugana. Keep it clean. Yeah? Let it get a manicure every few weeks, a pedicure. Take it to the station. Make sure it's gewaldig. And it's all beautiful. And it chas v'shalom to be at mevatel. But epis is missing, yeah? What's missing? The pnimius. The soul to the soul. So pnimius HaTorah helps the Jew will create and cultivate a relationship that's pnimius to pnimius, soul to soul, ponim beponim. So Musar is gewaldik, but Musar focuses more on behaviors that are good, behaviors that are not good, midos that are good, midos that are not good. Gewaldig. Moiridik. And it's important. I don't know better.
Why is it a deeper perspective?
Well, you learn. You could not deeper. The whole Torah is one. The whole Torah is one. Everything is one. It's like a tapestry. It's a mosaic. Every part of Torah gives out a different layer of Torah. Yeah, it's true. The focus in Pneumis HaTorah is to really discuss the core of creation, the core of a person, the core of existence, understanding everything from a primal state. Taka in a relationship, if I can understand and you can understand my deepest primal state, both my gifts, my fears, my challenges, my talents, and we could connect from that place. It's a different level of connection, and there's a different joy in the connection. Right. So what a person could think in this, how does this apply? So let's say I want to connect to somebody, yeah? Let's stay in a marriage, for example. Yeah. One of the hardest, I would say this is one of the hardest steps in every marriage. And that is, can I really, really suspend? Can I really, that symptom, can I really suspend everything I know about you? Suspend it. Whether it's right or wrong is almost irrelevant. And really, really tune into your world. To other person's world. Your spouse's world. Really. Not say I am, or talk, I'm listening while I'm texting. Or even I'm listening just to, rebuff, to tell you why you're wrong. Or even just to say, okay, I hear. You know how men, I hear, okay. They think it's like in yeshiva. I hear, doesn't work. Without deadheaded. But can I really, really create space for your Weltanschauung, for your feelings, your emotions, your perspective, and really, really appreciate it. Like really. Even though I completely don't think that way. I completely don't feel that way. I'm just giving one illustration. That was the whole shir, no? Yud. Tzimtzum. That's the Yud. Yeah. Hashem didn't himself. Hashem went from Ein Sof to being finite. You know what that is? That's much more than when you have to go through for.
That's the thought. That's the avoidance.
Yeah. So it's one aspect. Yeah. It's a very serious trial. See.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.